Hello everyone, welcome to another episode with Broke Girls Art School. In today's episode, I'll be showing you guys how I made this woodburn.
Actually got this picture with it in Fort Collins. You can see a little family of deer off in the right corner. They're by Horsetooth Reservoir. And here's some by itself.
Yeah, I actually made this burn as part of my tip because I started my other sleeve out in Colorado, so that's why I got the super pretty pictures. Wasn't just in boring old Illinois. But yeah, if you guys have any questions at all for me, make sure to drop a comment and I will get back to you. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see some future content from me. Let's get started. Guys, I will tag some links in the description box below. I have some other videos if you're more of a beginner on how I go about like doing shading and stuff. And I also have other videos on how to stencil woodburn. So if you are more of in your beginner stage and you feel like you're missing a couple steps, then I will tag links for those in the description box below. And I will also drop links to all the different products that I use.
All right, so here is the stencil all taped on. I had to use 2 pieces of tracing paper for this because it was a bit bigger. And I approached this woodburn similarly to how I approach a tattoo. Stenciled it first, and then I'm starting the outline here. And one thing that I always recommend when outlining or doing any sort of line work on wood is to start low and slow and make sure that you stay on the surface of the wood, because that's where people get their inconsistencies if they burn too hot and then the tip can kind of sink into the wood, and that's when you get those like blowouts and unevenness with your line weights. So yeah, I was burning at probably like a 3 or a 4 here and just sticking on the very surface of the wood. I was wearing my Appa hat, if you see that peeking. Where my Avatar fans at, yo? Alright guys, so I just wanted to show you a little bit of real-time action so you can see the speed that I'm burning at. And like the tip that I'm using and everything. I've been using this just regular calligraphy tip from Coldwood Burners, and right now I am burning at about a 3.5, 4-ish. So I'm just kind of cruising around everything to get a basic outline done, and I'm not really taking that much time with this right now because I'll be going back in and doing a lot more shading. But as you can see, I have it burning at a pretty low temperature, and I'm going like on the very surface of the wood. And the slower you move your hand, obviously the darker it's gonna burn because you're letting more heat sink in. So right now I'm just trying to get a quick little outline. Can always go back and darken things up later. And you'll get your own speed with it. It takes time to kind of build up the muscle memory in your hand and to have the confidence to pull lines and stuff, but it all comes with time. All right, guys, and I'm just gonna show you a quick example. If I hike up my heat a little bit, I'm gonna move it up like 1 number, so up to like a 4.5-ish. And I'll be moving at a similar speed, and you can see off the bat how much darker it's burning just by being moved up like 1 notch. So I'm cruising through this pretty quickly. I don't want it to be too dark. But since these berries are in the foreground, I do want them to have a crisper outline than like these ones over here, for example. So I'll probably make these ones a bit more like prominent so they stand out more. And I don't necessarily want these lines to be perfect, because I mean, they're tree branches. So They're never going to be perfect. But yeah, guys, as you can see the difference between the 3.5 to the 4.5, that's why I always recommend to do like a little tester or just start at a lower temperature until you kind of get a hang of what you're doing so you don't have any blowouts. All right, I'm gonna pop it back in a time lapse. All right, so you can see I kind of went over the areas that I was going to be doing with an eraser real quick. I usually like erasing the graphite off just a little bit so that way you're not burning that graphite into the wood. Because if you burn right over it, then it can be a lot harder to erase. So yeah, I'm going around here, again, just getting those basic outlines in. And then here's some solid black. So for stuff like that, I hike my temperature up a little bit more. Makes the process a bit quicker. So here's about where we're at. All right, so I just wanted to knock some of the solid black out before I started shading the rest of the piece. So just getting that black out of the way on the face. As you can see, I'm kind of staying more on the surface of the wood. And then, yeah, made my way back down to the bottom, and now we're just going to work our way up with shading. So these berries and the praying mantis are going to be in the foreground, so I definitely want them to be more prominent. I'm going to have the back side of the berries be a little bit darker, and then the side that's facing towards the sun, I want to have like a highlight so you can see where the light source is coming from. So you can see on the bottom of the berries, yeah, a bit darker. And then I made the branch quite dark as well. Again, just to help make it pop out since it's in the foreground. Here I have my Chinese food. And my glass of wine. You know, that's the great thing about doing stuff from home is I can eat as much Chinese food and drink as much wine as I want, and nobody can tell me no. Tell me that's not the best thing in the world. And I was using my transfer tip from Razor Tip for most of the shading here. I use that for most projects now, honestly. All right, you can see those berries in the background. I did them a bit lighter than the ones in the foreground because I wanted them to look like they were set further back, almost kind of like when you put something in portrait mode and it's like blurry in the background. And now we're getting to the praying mantis. This was super quick to shade because it's such a small little insect. Well, not small compared to the bird. It's actually a pretty big insect, but you get what I'm saying. Doesn't take up a lot of surface area. All right, now we're shading up in the blue jay. Blue jays are some of my all-time favorite birds. I find their feathers in my backyard all the time. Very smart, too. Now we're getting that branch that it's perched on out of the way. And here's some detail work. And this is my round shader tip from Cold Woodburners. And I'm just using the tip of that for like some nice fine little details in the feathers. So as you can see at this point, we have made a lot of progress. We're looking good. All right, and here I'm going in with my torch. Absolutely love this for doing background work. It's really quick, and I love how you can see the rings in the
so here I'm
wood.
just going to be using this little torch. I got this off Amazon for like $12 or something like that. And you just refill it with butane like so. And this is, I do it at like a mid, probably can't really see the flame that well, but it's like the mid setting. And then I'll take this, like any sort of metal spatula or something, just to put it along the edge to make sure you don't burn outside of that outer rim. Which is not totally necessary, but I think it looks a little bit neater. And then I'll kind of pull back a little bit, move my hand a little bit further away, and then do some lighter fades coming in. And I try to avoid burning over the stuff that I put in with my wood burner, so I don't want to darken what I already have.
And I apologize if I explain things while it's in time lapse and then I explain it again in real time. It's hard to keep track when I have like 50 video clips, okay guys? Don't judge me. Yeah, here I'm just smoothing it out, and I wanted to darken out that bottom a bit to add some more contrast, and then bringing that fade in.
All right, guys, so now we have all of this torched in the background. I went a little bit darker on the bottom here just to kind of bring out some contrast. I might darken up this top a little bit, but in the meantime, I am going to paint the sun white, and then I might do some other stuff with the background. Like I was thinking about maybe throwing some blues in there, but I'll probably decide after I see the white. But I'm just going to be using regular acrylic paint and then flat brushes like this. I'm going to probably do like 2 thinner coats. I don't want to do it on too thick. And usually it soaks into the wood a little bit, and I want it to be pretty crisp. So yeah, I'll probably do 2 or 3 coats.
All right, so I ended up mixing, oh, isn't it funny that I said, don't judge me if I repeat myself, and then I repeated right what I said afterwards. But, so I did like 2 coats, maybe 3 coats of this white acrylic paint. I mixed in a little bit of water with it so it was easier to spread around and wouldn't clump. So that thinned it out, but it looked totally fine after a couple coats and went on super solid.
All right, guys, so now that I got this coat of paint down, the next thing I'm going to do is add the highlights with my Dremel. I'm probably just going to be doing that like in the highlights within the berries. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see where I'm pointing at. Like these little highlight spots, so it looks like the berries are kind of like reflecting off of the sun. I'm just going to hit those with my Dremel to brighten them up a bit, and I'll probably go around the edges of the main subject matter. So I'll want to go around the edges of the praying mantis and just the outer edges of the bluejay. I might go in the areas of like the bluejay that are like solid white and brighten those up a bit with the Dremel tool just to give them some more contrast, and maybe like the highlight areas in the praying mantis as well. But I think the only like white paint that I'm going to keep is the sun here. But yeah, so the Dremel tip that I'm going to be using, just like a regular ballpoint tip, and then pretty much just use it and run it right around the edges. It's pretty easy to use. That's why I really like this craft Dremel tool. I'll tag a link to this in the description box below. But yeah, I like this a lot because you can hold it in your hand, just basically like a pen. And yeah, so I'm gonna pull a couple lines just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So when using the Dremel, I'm just gonna wanna go around the black edges. This might be a better example in an area over here where it's a little bit darker. But it just creates a nice separation and barrier, especially after you do the torch, because it's pretty hard to keep that neat. So after you do like any torching or stuff that kind of muddies the design, I highly recommend the Dremel just if you want to go around the edges on things.
Like I said, I'm going to be doing like highlights in these berries. So it just adds that nice, clean, crisp highlight that we're looking for. So yeah, I'll use this a bit within like the main subject matter and the stuff in the background. Stuff that you want to keep more like muted, like it's like way more in the background, like these berries and these berries back here. I'm probably not going to do much highlights on because I want them to kind of look like out of focus almost. Yeah, I'm going to pop this in a time lapse and throw in some highlights here. Just one more quick little reel time. So this is just a close-up of where the piece is at before I go in and do my Dremel. I'm going to add quite a bit of highlights in the praying mantis. And a bit in the bluejay as well. So the Dremel comes with a bunch of different tips. I usually just use the one that I showed you guys for most things though. I like the round tips the best. So throwing some highlights on the belly there, and the legs and the berries. Excuse my voice if I'm pretty nasally. I've been sick the past couple days. So you can see, guys, I move my hand pretty slow there and let the Dremel do the work for me. Sometimes if you try to force it too much, the Dremel can catch on the grooves of the wood, and that is not good because it makes for less smooth lines. And we want them lines to be crisp. All right, guys, so now that I am finished up with the burn, I am just gonna use my Mod Podge and put a nice thin coat on top of this, and then I'm probably gonna end up epoxying it. And I always recommend using Mod Podge before epoxy because otherwise the epoxy can kind of seep through the wood and decrease any contrast that you have because it makes the wood itself darker. So yeah, I'm just gonna be using a regular paintbrush. When using Mod Podge, I always recommend making sure you have like a toothpick nearby to fish out any debris or dust that might get stuck while it's still wet, especially if you have animals like pet hair flying around. That tends to get caught in there pretty frequently for me. But yeah, so I'm gonna pop this back in a time lapse and put a nice coat of Mod Podge on here. Usually one coat is good enough. Again, you do want to keep them nice and thin. And you can do 2 coats if need be. I'll post another link in the description box for how to seal an epoxy wood burns, because that's what I'm doing here. But epoxy is pretty simple. You just mix part A, part B real well, and then make sure you get all the bubbles out. But I'll list all the specifics in that other video for you guys. It's a lot more in depth. And here's just a satisfying little slow-mo bubble pop video. Also, guys, when working with epoxy, it's very important to wear a heavy-duty mask because those fumes are really toxic and you don't want to be breathing those in and damaging your lungs. I think a ventilator mask is what it's called.
Alright guys, and just a heads up, when working with epoxy on like wood with live edge like this, sometimes there's a bunch of air that's like caught in between the bark, so little bubbles will kind of come up and form like that even after you've popped all the bubbles. So you just gotta kind of keep an eye on it for, you know, around 20 minutes and pop the bubbles every few minutes while it's drying, and then hopefully you can get a nice solid cure without any bubbles. But here is what the epoxy looks like. Super nice and shiny. I'll show a better video once I can like hold it up to the light so you can see, but you can see on the edges here the shine.
It's gonna look super good. All right, guys, so yeah, this is pretty much the final product. Little close-up for you. I'm super happy with how it turns out, and I really hope that he likes it. Shout out to Curtis Burgess for doing some killer art, and here's a couple more pictures with me in the mountains with it.